All praise is due to Allah, the most merciful, the most wise. We seek His help, His guidance, and His forgiveness. We turn to Him in ease and in difficulty, in abundance and in scarcity. My dear brothers and sisters, one of the greatest tests in life is financial pressure. When money becomes tight, when bills pile up, when responsibilities feel heavier than our ability to carry them, the heart begins to feel restless. At that moment, many people panic, some lose hope, and others forget where true help comes from. But as believers, we are taught something very powerful. Our provision does not come from people, jobs, or numbers in a bank account. Our provision comes from Allah alone. Allah is Ar-Rahman Razak, the ultimate provider. He provides without limit, without shortage, and without needing anything from anyone. Okay, now let us be very clear and educational about this. Islam does not teach us magical formulas or guaranteed shortcuts to wealth. What Islam teaches us is connection with Allah, sincerity in dua, and trust combined with effort. There is a practice mentioned by scholars and people of knowledge. When a person is in need, they may remember Allah by reciting His Nama Ya Razak, O Provider, chisa times with humility and focus. Not as a chant, not as a transaction, but as a moment of deep reliance on Allah. Why is this important? With free baby transaction, Brett, because when you call upon Allah by His names, you are reminding your heart who is truly in control. You are shifting your fear into faith. You are telling your soul, my situation may be difficult, but my Lord is far greater. However, my dear brothers and sisters, remember this well. Recitation without effort is incomplete. Dua without honesty is weak. And remembrance without gratitude loses its light. So while you turn to Allah, also seek halal means of income. Be truthful in your dealings. Avoid injustice and debt where possible. And thank Allah for even the smallest blessings you already have. Sometimes Allah gives money. Sometimes Allah removes expenses. Sometimes Allah gives contentment. And sometimes Allah delays not to deprive you, but to protect you. Never underestimate the power of turning to Allah sincerely in the last part of the night. With tears, humility, and hope, a door that seems permanently closed can open in ways you never imagined. So, if you are struggling today, remember this. Your situation is not permanent. Your Lord is always listening. And reliance on Allah is never wasted. May Allah grant us halal provision, barakah in what we have, patience in hardship, and hearts that are always connected to Him. Aiming understanding Rizq or provision is essential for every believer, especially when facing financial difficulty. Rizq is far more comprehensive than money alone. It includes wealth, health, peace of mind, time, opportunities, relationships, and even guidance. Allah makes it clear that He is the sole source of all provision, and nothing reaches a servant except by His will. This understanding reshapes how a believer views financial stress. Instead of seeing money as something controlled by employers, markets, or circumstances, the believer recognizes that these are merely means, not sources. The source is Allah, and the means operate only by His permission. This realization brings calm to the heart, even in moments of uncertainty. Allah distributes provision with divine wisdom, not randomness. Two people may work equally hard, yet receive different outcomes, and this difference is not an indication of Allah's love or displeasure. Some are given wealth as a test of gratitude and responsibility, while others are given restraint as a test of patience and reliance. When a person understands this, jealousy decreases and contentment increases. They stop comparing their situation with others and begin focusing on their own relationship with Allah. Financial difficulty then becomes not merely a hardship but an opportunity to grow spiritually, to refine one's trust, and to purify intentions. Islam strongly emphasizes that provision is written, but effort is still required. Trust in Allah does not mean sitting idle and waiting for wealth to appear. Rather, it means striving through lawful means while believing that the outcome lies with Allah. The Prophet taught that even birds leave their nests hungry and return full. They do not stay still expecting food to fall into their mouths. This balance between reliance and action protects a believer from laziness on one extreme and from arrogance on the other. When effort is made sincerely and results are delayed, the believer knows that delay itself carries wisdom. Another critical aspect of Rizq is that it is not always given in the form we expect. A person may ask for money, but Allah may give them protection from a major loss, relief from debt, or an unexpected opportunity later. Sometimes Allah withholds immediate financial increase because it would harm a person's faith, character, or priorities. Wealth can distract, corrupt intentions, or lead to arrogance if the heart is not ready. In this way, what feels like deprivation may actually be divine care. Understanding this helps the believer avoid despair and prevents them from questioning Allah's mercy during hardship. Your gratitude plays a central role in increasing provision. Allah promises that when a servant is thankful, He increases them. Gratitude is not limited to words. It is shown through obedience, contentment, and proper use of what one already has. A person who constantly complains about what they lack often overlooks what they possess, and this mindset blocks barakah. On the other hand, recognizing even small blessings opens the heart and invites increase. Barakah itself is a form of rizq, having less but feeling sufficiency, peace, and stability. It is also important to understand that sins can restrict provision. Islam teaches that dishonesty, injustice, breaking trust, and earning through unlawful means remove barakah, even if income appears large. A person may earn much yet feel constant anxiety, instability, or loss. True provision is not measured only by numbers but by benefit and peace. Repentance, therefore, is directly connected to rizq. Turning back to Allah, seeking forgiveness, and correcting one's actions can reopen doors that seemed permanently closed. Patience is inseparable from understanding provision. Financial pressure often pushes people toward desperation, but patience anchors the believer. Patience does not mean passive suffering. It means enduring with faith while continuing to strive correctly. Allah assures that He provides from places a person could never imagine for those who remain mindful of Him. When this belief is firmly rooted, fear of the future lessens, and hope remains alive even in the most difficult circumstances. The names of Allah are not merely titles, they are descriptions of His perfection, attributes that help a believer understand who they are turning to in worship and supplication. Each name carries deep meaning and spiritual impact, and remembering Allah through His names is a powerful form of worship. When a believer calls upon Allah using His beautiful names, they are aligning their needs with Allah's attributes, strengthening both faith and awareness of His presence. This practice transforms remembrance from a routine act into a deeply conscious and educational experience. Reciting a name of Allah such as Rizq nurtures certainty in the heart. When someone repeatedly remembers Allah as the provider, their internal narrative begins to change. Fear of scarcity slowly gives way to trust, and anxiety about the future softens into reliance. This does not happen instantly or mechanically. It develops through consistency and sincerity. The heart learns through repetition that provision is not dependent on luck or people, but on the will of Allah. This shift in belief is one of the greatest spiritual benefits of remembering Allah through His names. It is important to clarify that the power of Allah's names lies not in numbers alone, but in understanding and intention. Repeating a name a specific number of times, such as Chisar-e, is a structured form of remembrance that helps focus the mind and discipline the heart. The number itself does not compel Allah to give, rather, it helps the servant remain present and intentional. Without reflection and humility, repetition risks becoming empty words. With awareness, each repetition becomes a reminder of Allah's ability, mercy, and control over all matters. Remembering Allah through His names also softens the heart and increases spiritual awareness. When a person consistently engages in zikr, their heart becomes more receptive to guidance and wisdom. Stress and desperation often harden the heart, causing rash decisions and loss of moral clarity. Zikr counteracts this by grounding the believer, slowing the mind, and restoring balance. In moments of financial hardship, this inner stability is just as important as external relief because it prevents panic-driven choices that could worsen the situation. Another educational aspect of invoking Allah's names is that it reinforces correct belief about Allah. Many people unknowingly limit Allah's power in their understanding, imagining that their situation is too complex or too severe to be resolved. Calling upon names like Ar-Razak removes these limitations. It reminds the believer that Allah provides without exhaustion, without decrease, and without dependence on existing resources. This awareness corrects misconceptions and strengthens Tawheed, the oneness and absolute authority of Allah. The remembrance of Allah's names also builds a personal relationship with Him. Rather than seeing Allah as distant, the believer begins to experience closeness through repeated conscious invocation. This closeness fosters sincerity in dua, where a person speaks to Allah with honesty rather than formality. When invoking a name connected to one's need, the dua becomes more focused and meaningful. For financial difficulties, remembering Allah as the provider aligns the heart's request with an attribute that directly addresses the need. Consistency in remembering Allah's names develops discipline and spiritual resilience. Financial stress often disrupts routines and weakens motivation, but structured zikr restores order to a believer's day. It creates moments of pause where the believer steps away from worry and reconnects with purpose. Over time, this consistency strengthens patience and reduces emotional volatility. Even if material relief is delayed, the believer gains emotional and spiritual strength, which itself is a form of provision. Invoking Allah's names teaches submission to divine wisdom. When remembrance is sincere, the believer accepts that Allah responds in the best way, the fastest or most visible. This acceptance prevents frustration and nurtures contentment. The believer learns that every response from Allah, giving, withholding, or delaying, is rooted in mercy and knowledge. Through this understanding, remembering Allah's names becomes not just a means of seeking help, but a path to deeper faith, trust, and inner peace. Consistency with action is a fundamental principle in Islam, especially when seeking relief from financial hardship. Supplication is an act of worship, but it was never meant to replace responsibility, effort, or ethical conduct. Islam teaches that dua and action are two parts of the same path. When a believer raises their hands asking Allah for provision while neglecting lawful effort, they misunderstand the balance that faith requires. True reliance on Allah is demonstrated by working sincerely while trusting that outcomes are in His control. Lawful effort is central to inviting barakah into one's income. Seeking halal earnings is not only a financial obligation but a spiritual one. Income earned through honesty, fairness, and integrity carries blessing, even if it appears small. On the other hand, wealth gained through deception, exploitation, or injustice may increase numerically, but will lack stability and peace. A believer who is consistent in ethical conduct, even under pressure, demonstrates trust that Allah's provision is sufficient and that shortcuts ultimately harm more than they help. Effort must also be accompanied by excellence and responsibility. Islam encourages believers to work with dedication, skill, and sincerity. Neglect, laziness, or careless behavior can block opportunities and diminish provision. When a person improves their skills, fulfills their duties properly, and treats others with respect, they become more trustworthy and reliable, qualities that naturally open doors. These actions are not separate from faith, they are expressions of it. Every honest attempt, even when results are delayed, is recorded and rewarded by Allah. Gratitude plays a powerful role alongside action. Being thankful for what one already has prevents desperation and impatience from overtaking the heart. Gratitude shifts focus from scarcity to sufficiency, allowing a believer to act thoughtfully rather than impulsively. When someone acknowledges Allah's blessings, no matter how small, they attract barakah into their efforts. Complaining, on the other hand, drains motivation and clouds judgment. A grateful heart works harder, hopes more, and trusts deeper. The consistency also means persistence despite setbacks. Financial difficulty often brings repeated disappointments, but Islam teaches resilience. A believer does not abandon effort after failure nor supplication after delay. Instead, they continue both with renewed sincerity. This persistence builds inner strength and protects against despair. Allah loves consistency, even if actions are small. Regular effort paired with regular remembrance creates stability and progress over time. Another important aspect of consistency with action is managing resources wisely. Islam encourages moderation, planning, and responsibility. Overspending, wastefulness, or neglecting obligations can worsen financial strain. Taking practical steps such as budgeting, prioritizing needs, and avoiding unnecessary debt is part of faith-based action. These measures reflect awareness that provision is a trust from Allah and must be handled responsibly. Wise management itself becomes a means of relief. Trust in Allah must remain firm even when effort does not produce immediate results. This is where many people struggle, mistaking delay for rejection. In reality, Allah may be preparing something better, protecting a person from harm, or strengthening their character. Continuing to act lawfully and make dua during this period demonstrates true reliance. The believer understands that success is not measured only by outcomes, but by obedience and sincerity. Aligning action with dua purifies intention. When effort is made solely to please Allah and seek lawful provision, competition, envy, and greed lose their grip on the heart. The believer works hard without compromising values, knowing that Allah sees every intention and effort. This harmony between action and supplication creates balance, stability, and dignity, allowing a believer to navigate financial hardship with faith, patience, and confidence in Allah's wisdom. And hope in Allah is a central pillar of faith, but it must be understood correctly to avoid misunderstanding religious practices. When a believer is told that reciting a particular name of Allah brings benefit, it should never be interpreted as a guaranteed transaction or an instant formula for wealth. Islam does not teach certainty in outcomes, it teaches certainty in Allah's wisdom. The believer's hope is placed in Allah Himself, not in a method, a number, or a specific result. This distinction protects faith from disappointment and confusion. Allah responds to supplication in different ways, and all of them are forms of mercy. Sometimes He grants exactly what is asked for. Sometimes He delays it. Sometimes He replaces it with something better. And sometimes He removes a harm that the servant never even knew was approaching. When financial relief does not come immediately, it does not mean the supplication failed. It may mean that Allah, in His perfect knowledge, knows that immediate wealth is not the best outcome at that moment. Understanding this preserves emotional and spiritual stability during hardship. One of the dangers of attaching guarantees to spiritual practices is that it can weaken faith when expectations are not met. A person may begin to feel that their dua was rejected or that Allah did not respond, when in reality the response simply took a different form. Islam teaches believers to evaluate success not by immediate results, but by continued trust and obedience. The act of turning to Allah itself is a success, regardless of the visible outcome. Hope in Allah must remain active, not passive. Active hope means expecting goodness from Allah while accepting His decisions. It does not demand outcomes, it trusts processes. This type of hope keeps the heart alive even in prolonged difficulty. Passive hope, on the other hand, waits for change without reflection or growth and can lead to frustration. Islam encourages believers to hope while improving themselves, correcting mistakes, and deepening their relationship with Allah. Financial hardship often reveals a deeper lesson about attachment. When money is delayed or restricted, Allah may be teaching the believer where their true reliance lies. If faith weakens when money is scarce, it exposes an unhealthy dependence on material means. Through patience and remembrance, The believer learns to detach their sense of security from wealth and attach it to Allah alone. This shift is one of the most valuable spiritual outcomes of hardship. And another important aspect of hope without guarantee is emotional honesty. Islam does not require believers to suppress their pain or fear. Feeling anxious or worried does not contradict faith. What matters is where those emotions are directed. When a believer brings their fear to Allah instead of letting it turn into despair, they are practicing sincere reliance. Even moments of weakness, when accompanied by turning back to Allah, are acts of worship. Accepting Allah's timing is one of the hardest but most transformative aspects of faith. Human beings operate on urgency, while divine wisdom operates on perfection. What feels like delay may actually be alignment with future ease. Many people look back on moments of financial struggle and realize that those periods shaped their discipline, gratitude, and character in ways comfort never could. Understanding this prevents bitterness and replaces it with reflection. Hope also prevents sinful desperation. When a believer truly trusts that Allah is in control, they are less likely to seek unlawful shortcuts or compromise their values. Desperation often leads people to actions they later regret. Hope anchored in Allah acts as a moral safeguard, reminding the believer that no provision is worth losing integrity or faith. This restraint itself becomes a form of divine protection. Hope without guarantee strengthens sincerity. When worship is done solely for outcomes, it becomes conditional. But when a believer continues remembering Allah even without immediate results, it proves that their connection is genuine. This sincerity deepens faith and draws the believer closer to Allah, which is the greatest success of all.